Hello, pals. This is the Comics Pals Book Club. I'm here, your host this time, because you voted for the book that I picked. I'm your host, Tyler. I'm here with Sean,
Hello, hello.
Marco,
What's going on?
and Cale is off in Old Town right now, probably dodging either gunfire or cars. There's a lot of people dodging or getting hit by cars in this book. So that's what Cale's up to. So no Cale this week. But hello, welcome. This time, we're talking about Frank Miller's 1993 Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. So this is Frank Miller's 1993 book. This Sin City: A Dame to Kill For is the first miniseries in the Sin City franchise, whereas the first Sin City book was published in Dark Horse Presents, and this was kind of the more let's cash in on that Sin City goodness that people liked in its own book. So this is published by Dark Horse in '93. And it's probably the most accessible Sin City story, so that's why I wanted to pick this one. Because I wasn't sure if you two pals have ever read Sin City. Have you guys?
No.
Yeah, no, it's always been an interest, but never got around to it.
I
I,
saw the first movie.
Oh, I've seen the movie. The
That's
movie's the
funny.
movie's really good. That's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
It's
And
funny because I've not seen the movies.
okay, yeah, and it's interesting because it that made me interested in the books, but I've never gone to like explore. So I'm glad we got to read this, and I didn't know that it started out like that as kind of like a presents and moved and kind of like graduated into its own thing. So that's really cool.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to talk about the book for you, with you guys. But I did want to just get it out of the way first. If you like what we do, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/comicspals. If you like the stuff we put on YouTube, we have the VI Pals YouTube membership that you can be a part of. We get a cool little name, green little name in the chat, and you get some advanced viewing on some kind of more short form evergreen content that I think you'd really like. And if you have suggestions for that, please let us know. But what we do now, like, oh, Tom account in the chat, one of those aforementioned VI Pals. Nice to see you, Tom account. But let's get into this. So have you guys never having read Sin City before? I actually read this for the first time, I think in 2016. I read this for a different comic book podcast. This was actually recommended to me by Matthew Murphy, and when I read it originally, I wasn't hot on it. It wasn't my favorite thing ever, but I've read it multiple times since because it's just one of those books that just really jumps out to you on the bookshelf. I got this. I don't know what version this is, but it's like the pale, bright white copy, so it's always popping out of my shelf. Uh, and so I always pick it up. I'm always like, oh, it's a small book, and then I read it, and then it's all prose. Um, so I always forget it's not a short book. But yeah, I was excited to kind of delve into this. Have you guys? You guys have we did talked about year one before on the show, right? Have we talked about Frank Miller books in a book club?
Don't believe.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That's wild that we're starting with Sin City.
Well, we
Okay.
did the year one book club, but
Right, yeah, yeah, but like him as a complete artist doing all this stuff and like no, I don't think so.
What's your general opinion on Frank Miller? Because this is '93 Frank Miller, so Dark Knight is already a thing. Daredevil year one, that's all things. So Frank Miller is kind of going more into the creator owned space and kind of carving out his own a section that is kind of where he lives now in his work.
I'm a fan. I mean, his stuff I think is iconic for a few reasons, and has sort of stood the test of time for a few reasons. I think alongside the revitalization of Batman, like, and that's a sort of aside. I think he's just well known for his art. He has this blockiness to it. He has this kind of very uh, plain, maybe not always as like full of depth in the sense of it doesn't look like it's always full. It's just a flat series of lines on a page. I think that separates him from other artists and even contemporaries, where maybe people are going a little bit more detail focused. He's kind of pulling back away from, in my opinion, form. That's one of the biggest things he plays with is form, and everything in this book is all implication. We are
Yeah.
implying the shape of something. We're implying a line, certain direction, and I think that is one of the hallmarks of Frank Miller is, yeah, he can do his inks, yeah, he can draw superheroes, but when it comes to like his artistry, I think he's unparalleled. He's like, some of this stuff I could see on modern day museum wall or an exhibit or something, because some of it's really
Museum
good.
wall.
It's
The
real good.
MoMA having just negative space nudies by Frank Miller.
Hey man, solid work.
Well, so I mean, I do want to get into the art because I think personally that this book is an art showcase for me, and a comics medium showcase more so than a story. The story is it's a noir story, um, and it's a little cookie cutter, but I think this is more of a visual spectacle for me. Sean, in terms of your enjoyment of Frank Miller as a creator, um, have you ever read any of his stuff outside of a superhero book?
Nope. And I never really cared to actually. I think Frank Miller's very good. I think the superhero stuff is great, but there's nothing about it that's made me feel like I need to go and see what else he's done. Um, and I would say that this I felt the exact same way about this. Like it's good, but
Interesting.
it doesn't make me care. It doesn't make me want to see more. Um, I guess I like my Frank Miller in doses. I'm not really that huge on, especially like from an art standpoint. I like the writing, like I like the story of Sin City a lot, but the art, Marco said it well. The implication of things, I don't care for that. I like the explicitness of art.
Well,
Um, and I actually found it difficult to even understand sometimes what we were supposed to be looking at.
hmm.
And I don't think that that should ever be the case.
So
Um,
sorry, Sean. I thought
Go ahead.
I just want to ask you. So I wanted to kind of get that out of the way first because it seems like you're not the hottest on this. I wanted to get like a general temperature check on this book.
Okay.
So you weren't the hottest on this book as a whole.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I just don't think I like I said, it didn't make me care more about Frank Miller. It's cool to see a creator of his stature at a time when he was still very, very motivated. Um,
Sure.
and that's something that you can see on the page. There's a rawness to it that I really like, and an honesty that I really like. But again, most of my problems are art problems. I don't like black and white comics.
Damn.
Yeah, I don't.
Do you feel at least it was used in an effective way? Like the black and white was used in an effective way?
There were times when I thought it was. Yeah, there were times when there were things that were done that I was like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. But I think probably more the first half of the book was really, really, like Marco said, just implication, just shadow, and not really much clarity. And I had a big problem with that.
So when you say implication, like can we expand upon that for the listener and viewer? What do you mean exactly by that? Or I
Uh,
guess Marco is the one who brought it up. So what did you mean by that?
do you have a page up? Because I can.
I can bring one up. Yeah. Honestly,
Can
I
you?
think I know what you mean. I think any page will work, but I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
explain that to the listener.
In particular, if you can, page 60 that I shared, the last one, or the one with the whatchamacallit, um,
Yeah,
the
yeah, I have them up. Yep.
tiling. Okay, okay. Um, it's not up for me yet, but I think one of the biggest things that he does is he uses the white space, and in the example that Tyler has, um, the smoke, like realistically, or even the top panel, it's five shapes, but realistically four shapes. It's a series of it's a semicircle, almost like a crescent. It's an oval. It's maybe like an oblong square, and then there's another oblong rectangle. That's it. But realistically, what you're looking at, what's being implied in that top panel, is a man with a hat, um, one of those like butler hats, car
It's
whatever
minute
hats.
the character. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the minute the character, and he's throwing a fist. It's four fingers and a thumb, and yes, it could just be those four shapes as well, but I think because of the way that it works sequentially, obviously you know the previous page coming before is Minute trying to attack somebody, and that's all you see, and that's the only thing that Frank Miller cares to show you in this moment is a punch coming towards you with an angled hat. And for me, those moments are incredibly strong, super effective, with realistically not a lot of, I think, detail needed to explain and express what's going on. And for me, I think it accentuates it
Yeah,
because let's say you're in a fight, things get hazy, things get fuzzy.
exactly.
All you
Yep.
can maybe see are shapes. So for me, I think it translates really well. And then the subsequent panel here is a punch. You know, you get knocked out. I think for me, it works really well, and um, in its simplicity. And I find that an effective way to communicate a lot of times in comics is if you can make it simple and communicative, then you've done a really good job at presenting the audience with an idea, a piece of story, or a piece of art. I think the complexity or added complexity has places, but for me, this fits thematically, and it just fits aesthetically. So
I,
I really enjoy it.
what I think the simplicity of it all is what I like. I like how it's simple, but it's I wrote it down here. What did it's specific, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um, every so as I so I think this is my third read through of this. So I'm starting to see things a little a little differently as I'm going through it. You know, the first time around, it's we'll talk about the story coming up, but it was very much like, all right, story beats, real great. But like now I'm realizing like how much this is a singular vision of a creator, um, especially with the way page layout is and panel layout and letterbox layout. One of the things we always talk about on the show, on our weekly show on Pals Pulse, is letterboxes or balloons taking up, actual art space where you can tell there's art behind it that's, blocking out. The letterboxes are purposely laid out in a way where there wasn't art behind it because it was thought about simultaneously as the art was being made. Like the same page that you mentioned, page 60, with Dwight getting kind of punched out of this car. The letterboxes are not blocking anything. They're in the panels, but they're specifically there. There's a couple of instances of it, or even the onomatopoeias are specifically used to like meld in with the art, to kind of flow with the action at the same time. And I just really love the thought put into it,
yeah.
where you can tell it's just one person doing this. It's not a team. Where I guess too many cooks in the kitchen can sometimes happen, or things become a little more like, all right, this was handed off to this guy after this step, and then this guy took it over after this step. This all felt like it was happening at once, and then we actually get it on the page. And I think what I thought what you meant by the implication is that there's no real solid forms in this book. Everything kind of feels like a everything's more molded by the light, really, the lighting in this.
Mm.
It's black and white, which we've read black and white books on the show before. I think when people think about black and white comics, the one that everyone thinks about is The Walking Dead, and that book is a comic book that just happens to be black and white. I think it works with the Walking Dead nature of it because of it can show like blood without actually showing blood and all that. But this is different, where it's more like black and light, not black and white. Um, where like the panel that you gave me, I think it was page 55, where and we see this roof tiling, this like shackling, multiple times throughout the book, and there's no lines drawn really. It's just the shapes of the lighting of it that form it, that I just think is insane. The only person I can think about even doing something similar currently is like Danny, if you're familiar with Danny the artist,
Oh yeah.
who's fantastic. Danny did some stuff with Gotham in Arkham, in an Arkham backup that was amazing. So I actually love the loose but specific nature of the art in this.
I think that call out on using light makes makes a lot of sense. There was one that I had shared, that has some nudity, so we can't share it, but it's on page 53.
Marco picked all the titty pages. Like I was like, dude,
Well,
it's on YouTube. Come on.
well, this one in particular, 53, because it's the last panel, and it shows just a woman stretched out. She's bearing her chest, but if you look at the shape of the breast, realistically, it's just two crescent black splotches. That's all it
Sure.
really is. And to be able to take a look at that and see shape, see some level of roundness or depth to that, based on how uh, the thickness of the shadow is, or the thickness of the black just splotch is, for me, that is the implication, is really these are just like blotchy shapes, but by putting them in specific locations against each other in juxtaposition, you're implying some sort of shape or form. uh, and that to me is, that just blows my mind. There were moments where I was reading and I found myself 4 pages after being like, "Oh shit, I forgot all." I stopped reading all the text. I just was looking at pages, and I proceeded through. Say, "Wait, I got to go back like 5 pages, read again," and then I would again just get lost looking at. There are moments where I would stop and think, "Do you think he inked this, or do you think he started on a white page and then just added colors or like added inks?" Because I don't know what makes more sense, the artistry of it or the like efficiency of creating that page.
Dude, I thought about how he did this, and it breaks my brain. My brain does
Same.
not comprehend that way. Sean, so you don't you're more of a you prefer like deliberately drawn, where things have a little more form, and the ambiguity of what's on the page is less so. Is that
Yeah,
what you're getting?
I
Okay.
don't really find it to be that interesting. It's style for the sake of it, and I think it definitely applies here because it's a noir book, but that's the only reason to do it.
Hmm.
And that I don't care for. So because like I if it's just for the sake of style, then I'd rather have clarity.
Sure.
And I think you have a point there where you're saying like this is there he's doing this because he can do it, you know. Uh, and I think that's one of the other things I wanted to touch upon here is I think the idea of this book in '93 is a very specific choice. So what this book is, it's a noir book. If you've watched Chinatown, if you watched Casablanca, if you've read Batman books before, you're one. This is the classic. Not a detective, but there's our protagonist Dwight is a photographer, and he kind of gets mixed in with an old flame who's the femme fatale of the story, Ava, who needs help from her husband at the time, and then things go wonky. Spoiler: she is a femme fatale, so she is not all that she seems. And halfway through the book, we get a turn. It's I think a traditional noir book, but it's set in this weird Sin City universe. But the way I think about this being published in '93 is that '92 we had the Image boom, and this was the exact
Mm.
opposite of what Image was doing, really. Image was like, hey, DC Marvel, we're going to put out our own books. These are all going to be huge, bombastic superheroes. I'm thinking, Youngblood. I'm thinking, I always think of Shaft when I think
Max.
of Image Comics,
Max.
yeah, but stuff like that, Savage Dragon eventually as well. And this is a distinct turn away from that. It's creator owned. It's at Dark Horse, but instead Miller says, "Hey, I'm going to actually, kind of take the idea of like what Will Eisner was doing and kind of put my own spin on that." It's not superhero heroics. It's everyone is kind of shitty in this. There are protagonists in it with Dwight and Marv kind of makes like a cameo who's in the first volume of Sin City. He's the main character of that. But nobody's really good in this, which is kind of the opposite in my mind of what superhero books were at the time. They was very clear cut.
I think it comes down to your point on the noir nature of it. Like it very much is hitting beats that you see before, and I think it makes for a good structure. Like this is a good way to frame the narrative and the story, and that makes it fun. There are definitely moments where I could feel the I could just feel the genre. In particular where they where Drake, he's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't have her enter my life again, and then he goes in and provokes the very fact that he goes over to take pictures and just check in. I just need to do the thing. I'm like, okay, fine, we get it. You're a flawed character that you're holding to your values, but really you're just looking for a reason to cave. Okay, easy enough. The part where he where he hits her after telling her she's like beautiful or something, and then they kiss, but then strikes again, and there's just these contrasts that go back and forth, and they're icky. They're icky in some moments, but sometimes they're also just again the genre. You're looking at this idealized masculine man going for a last hurrah with this dame by on his arm, right? And I think for what it is and for what we need to communicate and get out of the story, I think it works.
See, I felt like this book was pretty, like, it's pretty apt for the time, right? Like, this is when we started to see the rise of the anti-hero, and the Punishers and the Venoms and the Wolverines of the world, and just the general sort of darkness of this time period, and everybody falling in love with, I think, this kind of story. It's not too long later that we get like Pulp Fiction and stuff like that. So this feels pretty in league with those things. And it feels like a comics with an X book done by a creator who had reached already the highest highs at the big two, which I think is a compelling thing, especially at that time period. And I like the book's edginess. I I appreciate the fact that it's just insane, and not it doesn't even all make sense. You got people surviving bullet hell, getting shot in the face. Like, everybody's a superhuman in this book. There are just no rules, and I love that thematically. Like, in Sin City, the rules don't apply. The rules of art don't apply. The rules of humanity don't apply. The rules of story don't apply. It's just lawless, and that was something that I really enjoyed about the book. Just Frank Miller cutting absolutely loose.
I agree with you, Sean, actually, because I think maybe Miller tried to make this kind of like something that's not being published right now in comics, but I think it then falls into the same tropes that either were in comics at the time, just maybe not as obvious in the Noir book, or become tropes soon after because of this. Just like, yeah, it's there's no superheroes in it, but how many people get shot 6 times in this book? Eyeballs get ripped out. Some guy gets shot in the face, but he's fine. So on paper, yes, they don't have superpowers, but how do you get through that without having superpowers? And just like even like the way he draws the characters too. There's a very Kirby-esque, meatiness to a lot of the character. Like Marv, that's a Kirby character. That's a dude, like, he's got the Thing fists on him, and with all the band-aids on his face, he almost looks like the Thing in some shots. Whereas I can almost feel like this maybe was Miller trying to do something different, but at the same time, the bones of comics is still there.
Yeah. The story is really, where I came alive, or I guess where the book came alive for me. Yep. Because it is very much classic noir. There are no unforeseen twists or anything like that. I think what makes this interesting, so compelling to me, is what I mentioned before about how it adheres to the rules of noir, but absolutely nothing else. And that's kind of fun.
It adheres to the rules of Sin City, like
right.
Like the one thing that the sequence that jumps out to me is when they're getting chased by the police when they're on their way to Old Town, and then they get shot up. The police get shot up by a whole bunch of I guess were they strippers that were the ones shooting them up, the strip club girls.
It was the women of Old Town.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And it's like, all right, that's Sin City, it's not it's Chinatown, baby. It's Sin City, baby. And I like how it does establish its own kind of rules in the book itself, which then, Sin City is how many volumes is it? It's
6 or something.
Yeah, like 6 or 7.
8 volumes.
Damn.
So you kind of have to establish a not a lore, but a rule book for this world.
Yeah.
That was one of my critiques. Is I didn't always understand the power scaling sometimes, because I was like, okay, this person could do this thing, but then this person could do this, but then they were also like, but it's also a weak gun. So it's like, okay, what is true and what should I be looking out for? Because then the next time that somebody pulled a gun out, I'm like, well, hold on a second, is it the right caliber? Like, are we aiming the right place? But also, is this person invincible?
Power scaling. I mean, that's such a manga way of reading this.
That's the only way I was thinking about it. I'm just like, where are you? Where are we? How do you stack up against these other people?
As I say that though, there is a bit of manga in this. It feels
I
the
would think
the
so.
the pacing of it. With each, this was traditional comic book issues, but I'm reading in this smaller format that I actually enjoyed reading it in. In the way that each issue kind of has a little cliffhanger at the end, which and the cliffhanger is usually Dwight got fucked up somehow, um, and it is a purposely makes you want to turn the page to the next issue. Um,
That's good storytelling.
it is, yeah.
I liked Ava a lot
I bet you did.
because it's crazy because, again, this is as far away from superhero comics as you can get, but yet you have a character who she has a superpower. And that's another thing that Frank does so interestingly here. It's almost like the motivations of the character become a superpower for them. In her case, her motivation is to get as much out of this world as she possibly can. She's accepted that this is a place that's like hell, and she's gonna capitalize on what she brings to the table. And in a way, how similarly to how the Joker is a force of nature, she's a force of nature. We don't know why she's like this. We don't know what turned her into this. We don't know that she's ever been anything other than this. But she is all powerful in the way that she knows exactly what it is that she can do well, and she wields her power like a nuclear bomb. And her power is to manipulate men.
The whole side story with Mort, I think his name was the detective that like 2/3 into the book, she seduces the detective who's on her case for her husband's death, so much so that like he kills his partner and then shoots himself. Like if that's not X-Men level power of of manipulation, I don't know what is. Um, but bringing up Ava is a good point because women in this book, women in Frank Miller books in general, are treated interestingly. Uh, it's weird because I think the women in here have agency. I think what is her name? Gale, is it? It's one of the ninja essentially of the group. Where I guess Frank Miller wanted to do more Electra books, so he threw Gale into this. Where they have agency and they are powerful, but they are sex objects in a way. They are sexualized, and the men don't trust them. Matt says in the book. I mean, the book is called "A Dame to Kill For." It's not the most positive positive thing to call a woman, but it's a weird middle ground that Miller depicts women in this book.
I think that the way we talk about sexualization makes it sound as if it's inherently bad. And I think this book views it more as an exchange. Power is what is at play in Sin City. And the women that we see simply understand how to wield the power that they have access to. For some of them, it's exclusively sex. Ava's allure is men wanting her. She's not physically strong. She can't beat anybody up, but she can make men kill each other for her. She can use her power to solve her problems. But Miho solves her problems in another way. She kills people. You know, she has no issue cutting people down with her swords. And so I think that everybody's power is positioned in the same way. It's just a different kind. And none of them are inherently more powerful than another.
I think to that, I'm forgetting the dancer that Marv is enamored with, um, but she wields that power, but she doesn't get presumably victimized or brutalized in any degree because you know that Marv is there protecting her, but she is carrying the room. She is entertaining the room and, to your point, driving uh, or controlling that power, like wielding it in a way for her that is advantageous to her. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, there is, domestic abuse in this, but maybe that's the Noir, realm of things as well.
Where was the domestic abuse?
Well, I mean, I view it in the way Dwight just beats Cale, and then or beats Ava, and then has sex with her right afterwards, like the one that Marco brought up earlier.
That was a part of her
There's a lot
power.
of backhanding involved, but yeah,
That was
it is a
that
power
was
exchange.
yeah, that was a part of her power. Yeah, everything we see in the book is an exchange on even ground. And if it's not even ground, chances are the women are actually wielding the power more, regardless of what you see. And I think that's why Ava is so powerful, is because what you see is not what you get with her at all. And that's often the case with the people in Sin City.
And I think the opposite of it too is compelling in the sense that it shows how unpowerful Dwight is throughout most of the book. He gets
Yep.
mollywopped throughout most of this book, both physically and he just gets manipulated,
Yeah.
throughout this. And he's a protagonist, so he's the superhero of this story in a way. And he's making bad decisions left and right. Nothing works out for him until the end, and even at the end, he doesn't really do a good thing. So our protagonist isn't really a good guy in this either.
No one is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single character we come across, I think even if we don't explicitly see them do something, you know, horrible, the implication is that everyone does and everyone has. And I like that.
So Marco, in terms of the and apologies for the little blip in the stream, guys, if you guys are here in the live chat. But Marco, one of the questions that we were talking about is the fact that there are no real likable or protagonists in this. Do you find that compelling still?
Still is in like a 2023 comic.
No, I mean just in general in terms of storytelling. Like if there's no likable characters in it, I mean, I've been watching. I just finished a rewatch of Girls, the HBO show, and nobody really is likable in that show. I mean, they are. I would say like Sex and the City's the same way. Like as a whole, nobody's really. I don't find anyone really likable in Sex and the City. There are aspects I find.
What?
Oh, I knew I triggered
Uh-oh.
Sean with this one.
Uh-oh.
Um,
I'm gonna take a step. I'm gonna take a
but
quick
I
step
still find
back.
it compelling, even though I'm like, oh, you dummy, why did you do that?
That's not the same thing as unlikable.
I watch Girls. Nobody's likable.
I've watched Girls. I've watched the first season of Girls.
Oh, well, it's got 5 more.
Adam's all right.
Do you still think that like it's still enjoyable? I guess enjoyable is the better word I'm looking for.
I do. I think because then you start sort of in some cases watching and or reading for the caricatures that people become. I think maybe you get up to a point where a person is unlikable in the story and then starts to become the character, if that makes sense. Like they are presented as this, but as that progresses, they just lean a little bit more into it. So yeah, for me, I think it works, and I think in this story, it works well because that feels a bit more. Um, the word that Sean was throwing around earlier was honest, and I think that that's fine. I think as long as each of these characters is true to their character and or character flaw, then I think it can become a compelling story, and in this case, it was.
So one of the other things I wanted to talk about is that um, there. The one thing I noticed in this too is the panel layout of the art, and there are some panels with borders and some panels without borders. There's a lot of use of the 3 panel page layout, which funnily enough, I think Darwin Cook uses a lot in New Frontier.
Mm.
That you see throughout this book, and the fact that some pages that are more kind of bathed in light require that black border, but a lot of times, like the panel layout is non-existent. It's part of the art, which I don't really see often, and that really jumped out to me on this time around.
Yeah, I think it just plays out to the that contrast of black and white. Like if you want to have space, he'll choose that white background because then you can play with whether or not you need a panel border, and then the black will obviously delineate some level of separation because there's some intention there. So I think it's case dependent on like how effective it might be.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. A lot of the book is laid out in such a way where you see, there's like a lot of like just prose, I guess, to it, where it's just an image and then juxtaposed with like some kind of background and just, narration or whatever, inner thoughts. Um, and that was fine. Normally, I don't really love that in books. I find it to be something that slows things down. I'm not so sure that that wasn't intentional. It reminds me of the moments in a movie like this where a character might be transitioning from one place to another, and while that's happening, we can hear their thoughts. This
I,
felt like the equivalent of that.
I was going to ask you specifically. I had in my notes here. Ask Sean about the pros, because I know you've talked, about, I guess, more modern comics where things can be a little prosy. I know Marco's a fan, but Flash, the Cy Spurrier's Flash, where there's a lot of talking in that book and there's a lot of internal monologue. Do you think that this is just done well, or do you think the setting of it lends itself to that more? Because when you think of a noir, the detective, monologuing behind it is kind of integral to the form of it all.
Yeah, I don't think that there is an overabundance of dialogue or narration in this comic. I mean, outside of that specific trope, which, as I said, is being used as a trope, I feel like the dialogue is crisp and brisk, and it does what it needs to do. It all feels intentional for the character. It doesn't feel self-serving on any level. It's easy to fall into because it's there's nothing like when you read certain comics, it's like, okay, did this need to be said? Was this a relevant bit, or is this just for the writer? And I never had to ask myself that question while reading this.
That's fair. It's a good point too. Like, yeah, if you don't question it, if it works for the story, in those moments, I think I found myself surprised at how much I need to read, but it worked for the narrative, and I didn't mind that.
Surprised by how much I need to read is me realizing I had to read this again 2 days ago. So I was like, oh, I forgot how much of the panels, the side panels, are full of prose. But I do think it works on a case by case basis. I think that the noir trappings lend itself to prose and internal monologue, whereas like the Flash does not. Sorry, still gonna crap on that here.
One, you're wrong, but one thing that I noticed, and specific to the lettering, and this threw me off a few times, but the U's in particular are all lowercase U's as opposed to everything else being capital or capitalized. It has the little tail, and um, that to me threw me off a few times.
Interesting, because I did some research into it, and I believe this was hand lettered from this, from what I gathered. Um, whereas when I think of specific lettering, I think of Ultimate Universe versus main 616 universe of Marvel Comics, where Ultimate Universe uses capitals and then lowercase, and main 616 is all capitals. Um, I don't know the reason to that for that in this, other than that's how Frank Miller writes a U.
Yeah, for sure. No,
Yeah.
I think it is just stylistic, but it's just that one change in letter. I would catch it mostly on the SFX, but it's throughout the entirety of the book. It just caught me.
So I mean, in terms of like the plot, there's not much there. I mean, it's straightforward. Nobody's really likable, but everyone gets their comeuppance in a way. There is a good couple of panels throughout this book that have Hellboy references in it, because at the same time, Mike Mignola was a contemporary and Hellboy was coming out from Dark Horse at the same time. I think in Dark Horse Presents, um, and I thought that was a neat little thing. And there's also one bit where it's Mort and his partner, whose name I forget, Bobby maybe, the detectives. They're driving, and you see Marv and a woman driving at the same time, uh, which kind of jumps out a little more on the page than actually Mort. And that's actually to show that it is happening contemporarily with Sin City Volume 1. Because, spoiler, Marv does not make it out of Sin City Volume 1. So uh, the fact that it happens at the same time, sort of, lets Marv be in this book still, and them to capitalize on the character of Sin City, for the mini series that's actually dubbed Sin City instead of Dark Horse Presents, which I thought was a neat little Easter egg there.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I did see that and I saw like, oh, I'm like, wait, wasn't he just like in a
Yeah,
fight? Like what's going on here? Like, okay, that makes sense.
I think that's when they go to kill Kevin. I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, I generally like this book a lot. I mean, this is more of an art feast for me. I think the story is fine. I think it's good. I think the story is good, but it's not breaking any molds in terms of the actual beats that it does. But for me, it's more of a smorgasbord of art, more than anything. Did you guys have any things you guys wanted to kind of pick apart throughout this?
No, I mean, I think we've done it. I think this is a really strong entry from a creator who, this is the prime of Frank Miller's career.
Hmm.
And I think that, there's definitely a lot to like here. I had a great time with the story. I think it was a lot of fun. It's dark and definitely edgy, but that doesn't bother me. Um, I think that a lot of things have come after this that might make this seem like not as much of an achievement. Um, like Criminal, for example, by Brubaker and Phillips
Sure.
is Sin City.
Hmm.
It might not be called that, but if you read it, you can't deny at least some level of the influence. There's nothing wrong with that. And then of course you have the Sin City movie, which is something that I think pop culture wise far outclipses what people think about the comics or whether they even know that they are comics. I think back to when the movie first came out and I had no idea it was a comic book.
Yep.
Does that movie have lasting, I guess, value in the public eye?
I think Sin City is something that people remember. I think especially before the sequel came out, there was a huge clamoring for more Sin City. And then I think I didn't see it, but I think maybe it wasn't very good. But the idea of Sin City is definitely something that I think is enduring. Yeah,
I mean, that's probably why we have a Spirit movie that wasn't too great, which is like a weird reversal of the of what's influencing what, from the comic.
right.
Um,
Yeah, that
but I
was
never saw
weird.
the movie, so I don't know its pop culture significance, honestly.
I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like afterwards you would get all of the or a few movies afterwards would ape the single color grading for like to accentuate something. So for the spirit, it was his red tie. For the yellow something, I'm forgetting the name of that one, but it was just like a dude in yellow, and that stuck out because everything else was black and white. I think it led to that stylistic choice for a while, and I've seen it since. So yeah, I think it definitely has some staying power.
You talking about Dick Tracy,
The what?
the dude in yellow? I think of
Talking about
Dick Tracy, and then the Curious George's guy.
talking about
Oh,
Yellow Bastard.
yeah. That's
Oh,
it.
in the Sin City book. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
He was talking about the movie and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Um,
I think it's a great movie, and I think at the time it was seen that way.
I think it's remembered that way too. Like I
Yeah.
have fond memories of being like, that was a fun ass movie. That was really cool. I hadn't seen these other things, and to some extent it's a little absurd too, which I think plays to its advantage.
All I remember being, I think I was like 15 or whatever age I was, and Jessica Alba
Word.
playing, I forget the character's name, but she's one of the dancers at the club. And I remember that day learning that I like Jessica Alba.
I realized I felt like you were going to overshare there for a second, and you caught yourself. So I appreciate that. But no, I know what you mean, Sean. I know the shot you're talking about too. Yeah.
Yeah, I that was interesting. Yeah, that was interesting.
Good movie.
It's not palling
Yeah.
around. Let's keep it
Great
PG. But yeah, that's Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. I enjoy it. It has helped make me appreciate Frank Miller. I mean, I'll be honest, I was not a big Frank Miller guy a decade ago, and since then I've kind of learned to really enjoy him. Like even his current Marvel stuff, like in so much as the variant covers that he does, I enjoy. The naming of Dark Knight 3, maybe not so much, but and Holy Terror, oh boy, that is not going to be a book club. That will not be one of the things you can ever vote for.
I have it.
I bet you do, Marco.
I bought it specifically so I could be like, you know what? Everybody's throwing their opinions out about this. What about my opinion? Let me read it.
And then you proceeded to not read it.
To
right?
Typical
read it,
man.
yep.
Typical man. Yeah. So, thanks for listening to the technical issue book club. But we can announce actually what our next book club voting options are here. So, yeah, there will be 3 options that you have. And let's see. Sean, did you put yours in here? I see Marco's and
Yeah.
mine.
We can just announce our own.
Yeah, just announce your own. Yeah, Marco, why don't you say what yours was?
My next pick is Vader Down. That is the Marvel relaunched, specifically the arc where it crosses over with Star Wars and their Darth Vader book that was going on concurrently at the time. 2016, I want to say, maybe a little bit later. A lot of fun, great art, great storytelling. Please vote for it. I want to read it again.
I remember reading that when it came out. It's
So good.
it's not bad. Do I remember it being good? I'm not sure, but
It's
Bro,
pretty good.
is it?
I
Okay.
I still remember the line. And I'm not gonna shoot my load.
I think I know
there's
Yeah.
there's a line that it's burned into my memory, and I think back to that. I'm just like chills, goosebumps.
So my pick is actually something that might become relevant in the next coming years, thanks to James Gunn. I'm picking The Authority, Book 1 by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch.
Nice.
Just wacky Warren Ellis team books. That is my forte, honestly. So be curious to see what people think about that.
Awesome. My pick is Secret Invasion. We are a little late on the synergy with the TV show, but take heart in the fact that the book is far superior to that abomination. I disliked Secret Invasion. Then I found that I love Secret Invasion. So I'm excited to talk about Secret Invasion.
And don't worry, Sean. Marvel also missed a synergy on it. So not
Fair
a big
enough.
deal. But that's the show. If you guys have any thoughts on it, feel free to comment. Feel free to follow us. Remember, Patreon is a thing where you can vote for those 3 aforementioned titles to pick, and you can just vote against Marco just to see it, make him feel bad if you want. We're still getting the Patreon money for it, but yeah, I appreciate everyone. Thank you for joining us, and until next month, this is the Comics Pals Book Club. See you then.
Take care, guys.
Vader.